I knew something was wrong the moment I walked into the conference room that Tuesday morning. The usual chatter died instantly, and everyone suddenly found their coffee cups fascinating. My stomach dropped when I saw Daniel sitting in Dad's old chair. The leather one with the worn armrest where our father used to drum his fingers during tough negotiations. "Close the door behind you, Marcus," Daniel said without looking up from his papers. His voice had that practiced corporate tone he'd picked up during his MBA program, the same tone that used to make Dad roll his eyes. I'd been running the operations side of Hartwell Construction for 8 years, ever since graduating from trade school. Started as a grunt hauling lumber, worked my way up to site supervisor, then project manager. When Dad had his heart attack 2 years ago, I kept the company afloat while Daniel was still playing businessman in Chicago. But apparently, blood runs thicker than sweat equity. "We're restructuring," Daniel announced, sliding a folder across the mahogany table. "The industry's changing, and we need to adapt or die." I opened the folder. Termination letter, severance, package, non-compete clause that would keep me out of construction in the tri-state area for 18 months. My hands didn't shake. They just went numb. "Danny, what the hell is this?" "It's business, Marcus. Nothing personal." He finally looked at me then, and I saw something cold in his eyes. This wasn't just about efficiency or profit margins. This was about erasing me from the legacy our father built with his bare hands. The room stayed silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. I thought about all those nights I'd stayed late to finish proposals, all the weekends I'd spent on job sites while Daniel was networking at country clubs. I thought about Mrs. Chen, who'd trusted me with her kitchen renovation, and old Mr. Rodriguez, who'd shake my hand every Friday when I came to check on his basement project. "You know, what's funny?" I said, standing up slowly. "Dad always said you had the brains for business, but I had the hands for building. Guess he forgot to mention which one actually matters in construction." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Times are changing, Marcus. We need marketing, not just muscle." I walked to the window overlooking the shop floor. Jimmy Martinez was teaching one of the new kids how to properly measure crown molding. Sarah was reviewing blueprints with Mrs. Patterson, our longtime architect. These people trusted me, respected me, and Daniel was about to scatter them to the wind. "I'll clean out my office," I said, turning back toward the door. "Marcus, wait." For a split second, his corporate mask slipped. "Maybe we can work something out. A consulting position or—" "No." I opened the door, then paused. "You want to know what Dad would say about this? He'd say you're about to learn the difference between running a company and destroying one." Walking out of that conference room was the longest walk of my life. Every step felt like betrayal. Not mine, but theirs. The betrayal of 15 years of loyalty, of family, of everything I thought mattered. My truck keys felt heavy in my pocket as I passed my office, past the photos of completed projects, past the handwritten thank you cards from satisfied customers. But as I reached the parking lot, something strange happened. The weight started lifting. Maybe it was anger, maybe it was determination, but I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Free. Free from Daniel's politics, free from board meetings about quarterly projections, free from pretending that blood automatically meant loyalty. I sat in my truck for a long moment, looking back at the building. Dad's name was still on the sign, but his soul had left the moment Daniel decided that profit mattered more than people. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Time to make some calls. The first call was to Jimmy Martinez. He'd been with us for 12 years, started as an apprentice carpenter when he was barely 19. His voice cracked when I told him what happened. "That son of a bitch," Jimmy muttered, then quickly apologized. "Sorry, Marcus. I know he's your brother and all, but—" "Half-brother," I corrected. "And don't apologize. I'm thinking the same thing." "So what now? You gonna fight this?" I stared at the non-compete clause again. 18 months felt like a lifetime. "I don't know yet. But Jimmy, listen to me. Whatever happens, don't quit. You've got Maria and the kids to think about. Promise me. Marcus, man, you know I can't work for that guy. Not after what he did to you. The loyalty in his voice hit me harder than Daniel's betrayal. These weren't just employees. They were family. The kind of family that shows up when your truck breaks down, that remembers your birthday, that works through lunch to meet a deadline because they believe in what you're building together. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Patterson. Heard the news. Coffee tomorrow. 7 a.m. Usual spot. Sarah had been our architect for 6 years. Brilliant woman. Could design anything from a simple addition to a complete historical restoration. More importantly, she understood that construction wasn't just about following blueprints. It was about solving problems that no plan could anticipate. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived the next morning. Sarah was already there, nursing what looked like her second espresso. She stood up when she saw me, and for a moment, I thought she might actually hug me. Instead, she just shook her head. I saw the email Daniel sent to all subcontractors this morning, she said without preamble. New leadership, new standards, exciting changes ahead. Made me want to throw my laptop out the window. He's not wasting any time. Neither should you. She pulled out a tablet and slid it across the table. Remember the Riverside project? The Victorian restoration we pitched last month? I remembered. Old Queen Anne-style house. Needed everything. From foundation work to historical window restoration. The kind of project that takes patience, skill, and attention to detail. Daniel had called it low-margin heritage nonsense. The Hendersons loved our proposal, Sarah continued, but they're having second thoughts about Hartwell construction. Apparently, Daniel's new efficiency consultant told them they could save 30% by using vinyl windows instead of restoring the originals. On a historical landmark? That's what Mrs. Henderson said. She was appalled. Called me yesterday asking if there was any way to work with just our team. Sarah leaned forward. Marcus, she specifically asked for you. Said she remembered how you talked about preserving the house's character, how you understood what the place meant to their family. I felt something stirring in my chest. Not quite hope, but something close to it. Sarah, I can't. The non-compete says, you can't work for a competing construction company in the tri-state area. It doesn't say anything about freelance consulting or independent contracting. She smiled for the first time since I'd sat down. I did my homework. I also talked to my lawyer. You talked to your lawyer? About 15 minutes after I heard what happened. Look, I've been thinking about going independent for a while now. This just pushed up my timeline. She pulled up another screen on her tablet. I've got 3 other projects lined up. Small stuff, but quality work. The kind of projects where craftsmanship matters more than cutting corners. I stared at the tablet, at the photos of beautiful homes that needed careful, thoughtful restoration. The kind of work that made me fall in love with construction in the first place. Before quarterly reports and efficiency metrics and corporate restructuring. What about your contract with Hartwell? Expires in 2 weeks. I was planning to renew, but she shrugged. Daniel made that decision pretty easy. He wants to bring in his own people anyway. Some firm from Chicago that specializes in streamlined residential solutions. We sat in silence for a moment, watching the morning commuters rush past the coffee shop window. Regular people heading to regular jobs, probably never having to worry about whether their livelihood could disappear overnight because of family politics. There's something else, Sarah said quietly. Jimmy called me last night. So did Tom Rodriguez and Angela Foster. Word's getting around about what happened. People are upset. Angela was our best electrician, and Tom had been our plumbing contractor for 8 years. Good people, reliable people. The kind of team that made impossible deadlines possible and turned construction sites into communities. Sarah, I can't ask people to risk their careers for me. You're not asking. They're choosing. She closed the tablet and looked at me directly. Marcus, do you know what everyone says about you? They say you're the guy who remembers their kids' names, who shows up when someone's in the hospital, who fights with suppliers when they try to deliver substandard materials, even when it costs the company money. That's just being decent. No, it's being a leader, and Daniel just threw away the best leader this company ever had. She stood up, leaving money on the table. I'm meeting the Hendersons tomorrow at 2, Riverside Victorian. If you want to see what freedom looks like, be there. As she walked away, I realized that for the first time in 24 hours, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I might be able to build. The Riverside house stood like a wounded soldier, proud but battered. Paint peeling from the elaborate gingerbread trim, original windows clouded with age, front porch sagging under the weight of too many harsh winters. But underneath the neglect, you could see the bones of something magnificent. Mrs. Henderson met us at the front gate, a woman in her 70s with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her husband Robert followed a step behind, walking with a cane but moving with the deliberate confidence of someone who'd spent his life making important decisions. Mr. Hartwell, she said, shaking my hand firmly. I was hoping you'd come. Actually, it's just Marcus now. I'm no longer with Hartwell Construction. She exchanged a quick glance with her husband. We heard rumors. Is it true that Daniel wants to replace our original windows with vinyl? I'm afraid I can't speak for the company's current policies. But you can speak for yourself, Robert said. It wasn't a question. Margaret and I bought this house 43 years ago. Raised our children here. Our grandson took his first steps on that front porch. What would you do with those windows? I walked over to examine one of the double-hung sashes. The wood was solid oak, handcrafted back when builders took pride in details most people would never notice. The rope and pulley system still worked smoothly after more than a century. You could feel the weight and substance of it, the way it was built to last for generations. I'd restore them, I said simply. Strip the old paint, repair any damaged wood, reglaze the panes, rebuild the sash cords. They'd be good for another 100 years. Even though it costs more? Especially because it costs more. Mrs. Henderson, vinyl windows might be cheaper up front, but they'll never have the character of these originals. And in 15 years, when the vinyl starts failing, you'll wish you'd done it right the first time. Sarah appeared beside me with her tablet, pulling up detailed photos of similar restoration projects. The Hendersons leaned in, asking questions about timelines, permits, historic preservation requirements. As we talked, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. The pure joy of problem solving, of imagining how beautiful this place could become. There's just one issue, Margaret said as we finished our walkthrough. We had a contract with Hartwell. Construction. Daniel called this morning insisting we honor it. My stomach dropped. Of course Daniel wouldn't let this go quietly. You should honor your contracts, Mrs. Henderson. I wouldn't want to put you in a difficult position. Actually, Robert said with a slight smile, there might be a solution. Our contract specifies that Marcus Hartwell would be the project supervisor. If Marcus Hartwell is no longer with the company. Sarah looked up from her tablet. That would constitute a material breach of contract. You'd have grounds to cancel and pursue other options. I stared at both of them. You planned this. We did our research, Margaret admitted. Called 3 of your previous clients. Mrs. Chen raved about her kitchen for 20 minutes. Mr. Rodriguez said you were the only contractor he'd ever met who actually listened. And the Pattersons, well, let's just say they had some very specific things to say about Daniel's approach to customer service. Walking through that house, I realized something had shifted inside me. The fear was still there. The voice, asking how I'd pay my mortgage, how I'd compete with established companies, whether I was crazy to start over at 34. But louder than the fear was something else, excitement. the kind of electric anticipation I hadn't felt since my first day on a job site. If we did this, I said carefully, it wouldn't be easy. No big company backing, no established supply chains, no safety net if something goes wrong. But it would be yours, Sarah said quietly. That afternoon, I drove back to my apartment and spread the Riverside project plans across my kitchen table. Sarah had drawn up a preliminary contract for independent consulting services. The numbers were fair but tight, enough to cover materials and labor, with a small margin for the inevitable surprises that come with century-old houses. My phone rang, Jimmy's name on the screen. "Marcus, you got a minute? I'm in my truck, outside Hartwell's office, and something weird is happening." "What kind of weird?" "Three guys just walked out carrying boxes. Angela Foster's truck just pulled up, and she's shaking her head at whatever Tom Rodriguez is telling her, and there's a big sign in the window, 'Now hiring, immediate openings for qualified tradespeople.'" I felt a chill. Three guys walked out? Dave Peterson, Mark Sullivan, and that new kid, Tommy, all carrying their toolboxes. Jimmy paused. "Marcus, Dave's been here 9 years. Mark's got a mortgage and 2 kids in college. They don't just walk out unless something's really wrong." "Where are you now?" "Sitting in the parking lot, trying to figure out if I should go, clean out my locker, or stick around to see how bad this gets." I looked down at the Riverside contract, at Sarah's neat architectural drawings, at the photos of the beautiful old house that needed someone who cared about craftsmanship more than quarterly profits. Sometimes the universe pushes you in a direction you're afraid to go on your own. "Jimmy, can you meet me at O'Malley's in an hour and call Tom and Angela? Tell them I'm buying the first round." "Marcus, what are you thinking?" "I was thinking about my father, about the way he used to run his hands along a finished piece of trim, checking for smoothness not because he had to, but because he couldn't help himself. I was thinking about Mrs. Henderson's silver hair and the trust in her eyes when she asked what I would do with her windows. I'm thinking it's time to find out what we're really made of." O'Malley's was thick with cigarette smoke and the smell of fried fish when I walked in that Friday evening. Tom Rodriguez was already at our usual booth, nursing a beer and looking like someone had stolen his dog. Angela Foster sat across from him, her work boots propped up on an empty chair, electrician's tape still wrapped around her fingers from the day's work. Jimmy arrived 5 minutes later with Dave Peterson and Mark Sullivan in tow. The 3 guys who'd walked out of Hartwell earlier that week. Dave looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired that comes from 9 years of loyalty being thrown back in your face. "So," I said after ordering around, "who wants to tell me what happened?" Dave spoke first, his voice rough. "Daniel brought in this efficiency expert. Some kid with a clipboard who's never held a hammer in his life. Starts timing our bathroom breaks, measuring how long it takes to set up equipment, asking why we need to test electrical connections twice." "Testing twice?" Angela leaned forward. "That's basic safety protocol. You test before you touch, then you test again to make sure." "Try explaining that to someone whose biggest concern is billable hours," Tom muttered. "This kid couldn't be more than 25. Starts telling me I'm wasting time by checking pipe joints for leaks. Says the building inspector will catch any problems." Mark shook his head. "That's when Dave lost it." "Damn right I lost it," Dave said. "Kid tells me I don't need to sand between primer coats because the customer won't notice. I've been doing finish carpentry since before this punk was born. My reputation means something." I could see the anger in their faces, but underneath it was something worse. Hurt. These weren't just jobs to them. They were craftsmen who took pride in their work, and Daniel was asking them to compromise everything they stood for. "What about the new hires?" I asked. Jimmy snorted. "Day laborers mostly. Good guys work hard, but they're learning on the job. Yesterday, one of them asked me how to use a level. A level, Marcus. On a foundation pour." Jesus. "Gets better," Angela said. "Daniel's paying them $12 an hour. No benefits, no training, no safety gear allowance. Just bodies to fill space." I did the math in my head. 12 an hour versus the 22 that experienced tradespeople deserved. Daniel was cutting labor costs by almost half, but at what cost to quality? To safety? There's something else, Tom said quietly. Mrs. Patterson came by the shop today. You know, the architect, she was looking for you. I already talked to Sarah this week. Not Sarah. Mrs. Patterson, the older one, Sarah's mentor. Tom leaned forward. She said word's getting around about what Daniel's doing. Architects are starting to talk. Some of them are refusing to work with Hartwell anymore. That surprised me. Helen Patterson had been designing homes in our area for 30 years. If she was blacklisting Hartwell Construction, other architects would follow. In our business, reputation travels faster than gossip. She asked if you were taking on new projects, Tom continued. Said she had 3 clients looking for someone who understood the difference between building houses and creating homes. The table went quiet. Outside, traffic hummed past on Route 34. Regular people heading home to regular families in houses that someone like us had built with care and attention to detail. Houses that would shelter those families for decades if they were built right. All right, I said finally. Here's what I'm thinking. But before I say anything, I need you to know that I can't promise anything. No guarantees, no safety net, no corporate benefits package. Dave straightened up. We're listening. I've got one solid project lined up. The Riverside Victorian. Sarah's handling the architectural work, and the client specifically requested our team. I looked around the table. Our team. Not Hartwell's. Ours. How solid is solid? Mark asked. He had kids to think about, college tuition to pay. Contract signed yesterday, materials deposit paid, work starts Monday morning. I pulled out the paperwork Sarah had drawn up. It's not going to make anyone rich, but it's fair wages for honest work. And if we do this right, it leads to other projects. Angela studied the numbers. This is just barely sustainable. For now. But Mrs. Patterson has 3 more projects. Sarah's got 2 additional clients interested. And if we build a reputation for quality work, I shrugged. Well, we'll see. What about equipment, tools, insurance? Jimmy was always practical. I've got basic tools covered. Insurance is arranged through Sarah's firm until we can get our own policy. Equipment we'll rent as needed or buy used. I looked at each of them. It's going to be lean for a while, but it's going to be ours. Tom was the first to speak. When do we start? Monday, 7 a.m., Riverside House. I raised my beer. Welcome to Marcus Hartwell Independent Contracting. Shouldn't it be Hartwell and Associates or something? Dave asked. Hell no, Angela said, clinking her bottle against mine. This isn't about corporate names or fancy letterhead. This is about building something real. As we walked out of O'Malley's that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before Dad died. The excitement of a new beginning. Not the fear of the unknown, but the thrill of possibility. We had tools, we had skills, and we had something Daniel had forgotten about. We had each other's backs. Monday morning couldn't come fast enough. The first window came out easier than expected. 120 years of paint and putty, but the oak frame was solid as the day it was installed. Dave ran his hands along the wood grain like he was greeting an old friend. Look at this craftsmanship, he murmured, pointing to the hand-cut joinery. They don't make them like this anymore. We'd been working the Riverside house for 2 weeks, and everything was clicking. Tom had the plumbing roughed in ahead of schedule. Angela was rewiring the kitchen with the kind of careful attention that meant every outlet would work perfectly for the next 50 years. Jimmy was rebuilding the front porch railings, matching the original spindle pattern exactly. Mrs. Henderson stopped by every morning with coffee and homemade muffins, asking questions about the restoration process. She understood what we were doing here, not just fixing a house, but preserving a piece of history. The kind of project that reminded you why you got into construction in the first place. "Marcus," she said on a Thursday morning, "I've been bragging about you boys to my book club. Eleanor Whitman was asking if you might look at her carriage house. The roof's been leaking for 3 years, and the last contractor she hired made it worse." Eleanor Whitman. I knew the name. Old money family, beautiful colonial on Elm Street. The kind of client every contractor in town wanted to work with, but few could satisfy. She had standards. "I'd be happy to take a look," I said, accepting. Another muffin. "But I should mention we're booked solid through November." "Booked solid?" Dave looked up from the window frame he was sanding. "Since when?" "Since Monday, actually." Helen Patterson had called with 2 new projects, a kitchen renovation and a historic barn restoration. Sarah had brought in another client who wanted a master bathroom designed around an antique clawfoot tub. Word was spreading faster than I'd expected. "The phone's been ringing," I admitted. "Apparently people notice when you actually show up on time and do what you promise." What I didn't mention was the other call I'd received that morning, from Daniel. "Marcus, we need to talk." His voice was tight, controlled, face to face. Don't think we have anything to discuss. You're poaching my clients, my employees. That violates the spirit of your severance agreement." I'd laughed at that. "Your clients, your employees. These are people who chose to work with me, Danny. That's called reputation." "You're damn right it is, and you're damaging mine." The line had gone dead after that, but something in his tone bothered me. Daniel wasn't just angry, he was scared. And scared people make dangerous decisions. Friday afternoon, Tom came running into the house looking like he'd seen a ghost. "Marcus, you need to come outside, now." In the driveway sat a city inspector's truck. Not just any inspector. Craig Morrison, Daniel's golf buddy, and the kind of bureaucrat who could find violations in a cathedral. He was taking photos of our work permits, our material storage, our electrical setup. "Afternoon, Marcus," Morrison said without looking up from his clipboard. "Just a routine inspection, making sure everything's up to code." Routine inspections happen on scheduled dates, Craig, with advance notice. Anonymous complaint came in. Concerns about unpermitted electrical work. He walked over to where Angela was installing a junction box, examined her work with exaggerated care. This wiring looks questionable." Angela's jaw tightened, but she kept working. Her electrical work was flawless, always had been. Morrison knew it, I knew it, and he knew that I knew it. "What exactly are you questioning?" I asked. "Well, for starters, this box placement doesn't match the approved plans." Sarah appeared from inside the house, tablet in hand. "Actually, it does. We filed an amendment last week for the kitchen layout change. Permit number 2405B371. She showed him the screen. "Everything's been approved." Morrison's confidence flickered for a moment, but he pressed on. "What about material storage? These lumber stacks need to be covered." "They are covered," Dave said, pointing to the tarps we'd stretched over the woodpile that morning. "Has been all week." For the next hour, Morrison picked through our site like a detective looking for evidence of a crime that didn't exist. He checked our safety equipment, our waste disposal, our tool storage. Found nothing because there was nothing to find. We'd been doing this too long to make amateur mistakes. Finally, he gave up. "Well, everything appears to be in order, for now." He climbed back into his truck, then rolled down the window. "But I'll be keeping an eye on this project. One complaint, one violation, one accident, and I'll shut you down faster than you can say unlicensed contractor." After he drove away, we stood in the driveway for a long moment. The message was clear. Daniel wasn't going to let this go quietly. "That was bullshit," Angela said finally. "Pure harassment." "It's just the beginning," I replied. "Daniel's running scared, and desperate people do stupid things." "So what do we do?" Jimmy asked. I looked back at the house, at the beautiful windows we were restoring, at the porch Dave was rebuilding with such care, at the electrical work Angela was installing to last for decades. We were creating something meaningful here, something that would outlast all of us. "We do the work," I said. "We do it better than anyone else. We document everything, and we don't give them any excuse to shut us down." Tom nodded grimly. "And if they keep coming after us? Then we make sure everyone in town knows exactly what kind of person Daniel Hartwell really is." That evening, Mrs. Henderson called. Eleanor Whitman wanted to meet Tuesday morning about her carriage house. 2 more potential clients had asked for estimates, and Helen Patterson had another project, a complete Victorian restoration that would keep us busy through next spring. Daniel could send as many inspectors as he wanted, but he couldn't stop the one thing that mattered most in our business: people talking to other people about work done right. Eleanor Whitman's carriage house was a mess, but it was a beautiful mess. Water damage had rotted half the roof beams, and previous repairs looked like they'd been done with a blindfold and a prayer. But underneath the damage, you could see the original craftsmanship: hand-hewn timbers, traditional joinery, the kind of structural work that was more art than engineering. 3 contractors have looked at this, Mrs. Whitman said as we walked through the space. 2 said it wasn't worth saving. The 3rd wanted to tear it down and build something modern. I ran my hand along a massive oak beam, checking for rot, solid as granite except for one section near the roof line. "Mrs. Whitman, this building is structurally sound. The damage is all surface level, fixable with the right approach." "And what would the right approach be?" "Patience, matching materials to what's already here, finding craftsmen who understand how buildings like this were meant to work." I pointed to the traditional mortise and tenon joints. "Your great-grandfather hired real artisans to build this. We'd be honoring that tradition." She smiled for the first time since we'd arrived. "When can you start?" 3 weeks later, we were juggling 4 active projects. The Riverside house was nearing completion, the carriage house restoration was underway, and 2 new clients had signed contracts for spring work. I'd had to bring in additional help, skilled tradespeople who'd heard about what we were doing and wanted to be part of something meaningful. That's when Daniel made his next move. I was reviewing invoices at my kitchen table when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. Bill Morrison, Craig's older brother and the county's head building inspector. "Marcus, I need to see you in my office tomorrow morning, 8 sharp. "What's this about, Bill?" "Complaints. Multiple complaints about your operation. Safety violations, permit irregularities, unlicensed work." His voice was weary, like he was reading from a script. "I've got to investigate." "Bill, you know me. You inspected my work for 8 years when I was with Hartwell. When have I ever cut corners on safety? Just be here tomorrow, Marcus, and bring all your documentation." I spent that night gathering every permit, every invoice, every safety certification we had. Sarah helped me organize the paperwork into neat folders, each project documented like we were preparing for trial. The county building office smelled like coffee and bureaucracy. Bill Morrison looked uncomfortable as he spread the complaints across his desk. Anonymous reports claiming we were working without permits, using unlicensed electricians, storing hazardous materials improperly. "This is all fabricated," I said, after reading through the accusations. "Look at the dates. Half these alleged violations happened on days when we weren't even on those job sites." "I know," Bill rubbed his temples, "but I still have to investigate. It's policy." "Who filed these complaints?" "They're anonymous." "Anonymous my ass. This has Daniel's fingerprints all over it." Bill looked out his window toward the parking lot. "Marcus, off the record, your brother came to see me last week. Made some vague comments about ensuring quality standards and protecting the community from unlicensed contractors. Half-brother. And I'm fully licensed." I know that. You know that. But he's suggesting maybe your independent status doesn't cover the scope of work you're doing. Bill leaned back in his chair. Look, I've been doing this job for 22 years. I know the difference between legitimate concerns and political bullshit. But my hands are tied. I have to follow procedure. The investigation took 2 weeks. Bill's team inspected every active job site, reviewed every permit, interviewed every client. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. But the damage was done. Word spread that we were under investigation. 2 potential clients backed out. 1 current client asked nervous questions about project delays. Meanwhile, I started hearing stories about Hartwell Construction. Jimmy Zio, replacement, one of Daniel's $12 an hour hires, had installed a bathroom vanity crooked, then tried to fix it by tilting the mirror. A kitchen renovation had been delayed 3 weeks because Daniel's efficiency expert had ordered the wrong size cabinets. Mrs. Chen, my former client, called to tell me that Daniel's crew had damaged her neighbor's fence and refused to repair. People are starting to notice, Sarah said as we reviewed the latest project schedules. Helen Patterson told me 3 architects have stopped recommending Hartwell for their clients. Good. Maybe Daniel will learn that reputation matters more than profit margins. Actually, I think it's making him more desperate. Angela heard from someone at the supply yard that Hartwell's having cash flow problems. They're 60 days behind on payments to several vendors. That surprised me. Dad had always been obsessive about paying suppliers on time. A good relationship with your vendors is worth more than money in the bank, he used to say. If Daniel was letting those relationships deteriorate, he was in deeper trouble than I thought. The breaking point came on a Thursday morning in October. I was at the carriage house helping Dave install replacement roof beams when Mrs. Whitman's neighbor came running over. "There's been an accident at the Riverside house," she gasped. "Ambulance just left." My blood went cold. We'd finished that project 2 weeks ago, but the Hendersons were still living in their temporary apartment while they waited for final inspections. Who would be in the house? I called Jimmy while driving. "Across town." "What happened?" "It's not our guys," he said quickly. "It's Daniel's crew. They were doing some kind of follow-up work. I don't know the details, but somebody got hurt bad." I arrived as the second ambulance was pulling away. Police cars lined the street, and a crowd had gathered on the sidewalk. Mrs. Henderson was standing in her front yard, looking pale and shaken. "Mrs. Henderson, what happened?" "Daniel's people came this morning. Said they needed to check something about the electrical work." Her voice was trembling. One of the young men. He was working in the basement, and there was some kind of explosion. The lights went out, and then we heard screaming. My heart sank. Our electrical work had passed every inspection, but if someone untrained had tried to modify it. They kept saying it was a problem with the original installation, Mrs. Henderson continued. "But Marcus, those lights have been working perfectly for 2 weeks. We've been so happy with everything you did." I looked at the house, my house really, the first major project I'd completed as an independent contractor. The windows we'd restored so carefully gleamed in the afternoon sun. The porch Dave had rebuilt looked solid and welcoming, but now it was surrounded by emergency vehicles and yellow tape. Whatever had happened in that basement, whatever had gone wrong, I knew. One thing for certain, this wasn't an accident. This was Daniel's nuclear option. And now someone was paying the price for our family drama with their blood.